Hey, good afternoon, John. John Donovan.
Afternoon, Marty Keller. How you doing?
I'm doing great, thank you. How are you?
I'm doing well.
Good.
I don't say I'm doing good or I don't say things are bad because both of those are judgments. So I'm doing well, and we got a half hour to talk about all the details that are going on
Fair enough.
as I'm noticing what's happening to me
Okay.
or for me.
Okay. And I'd like to welcome those of you who have tuned in to this, the Intentional Living podcast that John Donovan and I, Marty Keller, conduct on a weekly basis. We are examining the question of how do we break patterns of behavior that seem stubborn, resistant, and unwelcome. How
Yeah,
many times have we experienced a thought in our mind, I don't want to be doing this, and we do it anyway? Or conversely, how many times have we thought, I need to be doing X, and we just walk away from it and don't do it?
correct.
And so
Yeah,
there's something inside human beings that generate these patterns of behavior, and the intentional living process that John has developed and that has he's worked with for over a quarter of a century, helps us essentially not only demystify these behaviors, but generate something different, generate something more welcome, generate something more intentional. Again, that's why we call it intentional living process. How do I live my life according to my conscious intentions? Those intentions are answering the question, what do I want?
yeah.
So, I'd just like to welcome everybody to this ongoing conversation. Um, we do this work in group mostly, and in case I forget to invite you, we do run four different group meetings a week. John facilitates one on Saturdays, I facilitate one on Wednesdays, and information about how to join these groups and not only learn about this process directly through your own experience, but to ask questions, listen to people do this work. Information on how to do that will be at the end of the podcast. And one of the things that John and I have been discussing and want to explore a little bit more today is my favorite topic, frankly, John, which is why are we doing this? What's the point of working on recovery? After all, it's hard. Recovery
Yeah.
is very difficult. Some of the reasons that we've discussed and Dan and I have discussed in our other podcast on intentional living has to do with the fact that we're, as you say, biochemical electromagnetic beings. And so we have the body that operates according to certain unalterable laws. And that is how the brain develops and how the brain is wired, how the brain generates thought and emotion, and what's the relationship between all that activity going on in our brains and our will, our desire, our ability to create something different. And part of the challenges we've looked at is our brains get hardwired according to the emotional environment that we experience as really little kids.
Hmm.
And some scientists think it starts in the womb, that the hardwiring begins before we're even born. And so, as you've pointed out many times, this happens in a period of our lives where we have no conscious will whatsoever. We're merely reactors in those moments, those first 3, 4, 5 years, where we have no awareness of our actual experience other than at the emotional level.
Right.
So we haven't developed consciousness at the mental level yet. And so
Hmm.
things get hardwired and so forth. So it's hard. And
Hmm.
we've discussed this before. I don't know how many people um, enter a recovery group like AA, Alcoholics Anonymous, or Adult Children of Alcoholics, or Intentional Living, and don't stick it out to get to the place where they would like to be. And so it's really challenging. It's really hard. And one of the reasons that we do this in group is to support each other,
Yeah.
to support creating an environment of recovery, to creating an environment of unconditional love, which is where the kind of change that we're working on can thrive. And so, um, we thought today we would just share some thoughts about our own experience of, what are we doing this for? What are we seeking? What gets in our way, even those of us that have been doing this for a long time, and how do we continue to apply the practice to generate the life that we want? So, John, what are your
Yes.
thoughts about that?
Well, I have a myriad of thoughts about that. Um, and the last one was um, before I got into recovery, the only place I could seek help was some kind of therapy, whether it was talk therapy. And I wasn't really open to doing that because, as a man, it's difficult to ask for help. Um, and when my drinking became unbearable, in other words, it didn't give me the relief that it normally gave me, like I was happy and fun, and then I would turn on me, angry, not angry, but resentful and bitter, and a lot of the violence came when I was under the influence. Not that that was the problem. I didn't know what the problem was then. So when I quit drinking, I thought everything will be better. Cool. Just sober. Hey, I did it. I did what you asked me to do. Now let's get along. And I found that there was a lot more going on. And I was fortunate in that my mother had gone to 12-step meetings, so she mentioned it. Of course, I thought she was telling me so I could tell other people if I knew people that needed that had a problem. And then one day, just a friend of mine was talking to me about it and said, "Come with me." And I went to my first meeting. Actually, was an AA meeting that I went to support my cousin because I'm a nice guy, don't you know? I didn't need it, but I went. I'm going to support him. He's got a problem. And when I sat down in that ACA meeting, and at the time it was before they had the laundry list or 14 traits of an adult child, they read what they called the problem. And everything in that finally validated all the thoughts I had. It's like it it gave a name to those things I couldn't figure out, like um, see criticism as a threat. I would react when somebody criticized me, and wouldn't actually could not take feedback because it was too painful. I didn't want to be wrong. I didn't know all this, but I just you know resisted anybody giving me any advice. So, um, and then I slowly figured out that if I stayed there long enough, I could be like those people that I saw in the meetings that had been there for a while, and they seemed like happy. It's like I didn't understand it. They'd come to this meeting smiling and everything, and I don't they know what's going on with me? It's like this is not funny. Um, and I was fortunate enough to something in me just stayed, and I began to unravel all the um, conditions that I was what do you call it, exposed to as a child. My father was an alcoholic. My mother, I want to say bless her heart, was a what I call a flaming codependent. And then my dad died when I was 20, 21. And then my mother started drinking. It's like, and then she went to her own 12 step. Um, and the why for me now wasn't clear when I started. The why for me now is I've come to a life I had no idea was possible. To be self actualized, be able to hear somebody's opinion or judgment or feedback or criticism and accept it or not, depending on what I knew to be true about me. It no longer created a reaction in me. Um, I built a loving relationship with both of my daughters, um, and they actually enjoy having me around. Not too much, but yeah, but they enjoy having me around. And they're very loving, and I would support them and have supported them. Each one of them got sober around 30 years old, and so they've got a lot of time in, and so do I. So we have a functional relationship. When I say functional, I mean we go through things every family goes through, arguments, differences of opinions, and we manage to go through that without making somebody the bad guy or listening or noticing that, especially with my daughters, noticing when they tell me something about my health that they're actually concerned about me instead of telling me what to do. So um, we work through it. So the why is um, I have a life I never knew possible. I'm financially stable, which in my drinking and using, and most of my recovery was not so. Uh, I don't see authority figures as a threat. Don't get angry at criticism. It's just, when I first got in, the way I framed it in my mind, all I could say is, I want out of this, whatever I'm in right here. So that was my first thought. I want out. I didn't know what to say out of. I didn't know what to say where to. I just wanted out. And my experience and what was conscious in me was the incessant self criticism, self demeaning, self diminishing. And if I wasn't doing that to me, I was doing it to somebody around me. And it was, I wanted my mind to just shut down for a minute so I could take a breath and not have to hear this. So um, sometimes working in this field, what, 26 years, 27 years, um, some people come to recovery what we call externally motivated. They're motivated by somebody in their current close group said, you need to do something, you need to get help, or, and then they created an ultimatum. So they come in begrudgingly, and hopefully they hear something that makes sense to them. So I want to say I was internally motivated when I started. Um, in fact, the people around me thought it was odd that I was going to 12 step. What do you need that stuff for? You're not an alcoholic. You're fine. No, no, I wasn't in my mind. So that's the why for me.
So the particularly for the newcomer who might be listening to this for the first time or the first few times, it's perfectly okay, I'm hearing you say, if the motivation for this recovery is to stop suffering.
Yeah,
That
yeah, yeah. See, I
that
don't
in
even know
fact,
how
the
to
truth
say
is we
I'm
can't,
suffering.
I was
Go
gonna say,
ahead.
the truth is we can't really move to these wonderful experiences of life, the life that you never knew was possible, without the suffering starting to calm down
Right.
at the very least.
Hmm.
So as I remember waking up in the middle of the night with this this voice of catastrophe in my head, so loud and so incessant that I dreamed of finding some kind of crowbar that I could just stick into my skull and just whack that thing out of there.
There you go. Yeah, there you go.
It was so horrible and so relentless and so um, it's a pain that we can experience that's not physical.
Hmm.
I mean, if I fall down and hurt my knee or whatever, I can feel that throbbing or my back is sore or I have a headache or whatever. But this kind of pain is a different kind. It's
Yeah.
every bit as it might be worse, but it's every bit as horrible as a physical pain, and yet it's not something you can really um, Maybe you
Put your
can, but
finger on.
you can't dull it with a pill
Right,
as easily.
right.
And so, yeah, I work with people that have been doing this work for years, and they'll still say, I just want it to stop. I
Hmm.
just want it to stop. And that's a beautiful motivation.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, I wanted something different, but I didn't know how to formulate that, whatever that was different, because all I knew was this loop thinking, constant criticism, on guard, making sure nobody criticizes me like I'm doing to them, don't you know? Um,
But
so yeah,
I do think it's an advance that accountability practice that you developed um, from most of the other therapeutic experiences that I had, including adult children of alcoholics meetings.
mm,
Um, because in the accountability tree practice, we
yeah,
are asked to um, identify first, how are we feeling, to acknowledge that pain that we're trying to get rid of, to give it its due, because
yeah,
as we've discussed in many of our podcasts, there's something else going on that's below our conscious awareness. So we just give it its due. But the second part, and the part that I think is the advance, is we then identify what we want instead, because it turns out that it's not enough just to say, I want this to stop. I mean, that's powerful and it's appropriate and it's understandable. And I'm calling upon powers that I don't have inside myself or I don't control. In the 12-step program, we're calling on a higher power or God
right,
to relieve us of the suffering. And we are unaware that we have the power to name the relief that we want. So what I've learned in doing this practice, and I think it's really helped, is to say what I want instead, to identify what I'm experiencing in this moment, the suffering, the pain, and then having allowed myself to feel it, to sit with it, to be with it, in a sense, to honor it. I'm now free to say what I want instead. So it's not just that I don't want this. I tell you what I do want. I want to feel happy. I want to feel
yeah,
joyful. I want to feel adventurous. I want to feel free. I want to feel safe. All of those states of mind are now available to me once I own the original suffering, the original pain. Because
yeah,
for most of us, we've spent all of our lives trying different ways to get rid of it.
right,
And it's not something we can get rid of. It's something we can befriend. It's something we can love. It's something we can honor. It's something we can validate, but we can't attack it. We can't get rid of it by emotional violence.
right,
It takes this other approach that I had no awareness of when I started doing this work. I just had that awareness that you had, which is I don't want this anymore.
right. I'm tired. I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired.
Right.
Yeah. So yeah. Um, and when I first got into recovery, the first 10 years, I have 37 years in recovery. It worked real good. And I went to a lot of meetings. If I could, it was every day of the week um, um, for a long time, 5 to 7 years. But after about 6, 8 years, I asked the question, what's the next level? What's next? Where do I go to supercharge this or find new? I didn't know what I was really asking for. How I could frame it in my mind is 12 step is first level recovery, which is magnificent. It saved millions of lives. Very good organization. But I didn't want to be sitting there at 40 years. I don't know really what I wanted, but um, that's the way something in me asked for something more, second level recovery. So in my, I became a counselor in 2000. I started working in the jails. And with that, like in the back of my mind, there was a couple of things in the back of my mind. One of them was, what's the next level? How can we boost this or create healing space like the 12-step group, only more effective or specific to, that's what it is, specific to my issue. Because I heard everybody, it was similar, but I found myself still struggling with these patterns over and over and over. And my patterns after I quit drinking were rageaholic, workaholic, sexaholic, and a myriad of other behaviors that I wanted to quit. So when I was working in the jail, and I worked in the jail from 2000 to 2015, all this came together for me. Um, I was working at first as a violence intervention program facilitator. So the goal in that group was to recognize that I was doing violence, and specifically in the jail, physical violence. So to own the fact I was physically violent and be accountable for it. That's where the accountability tree came in. And I saw that it gave me, as a facilitator, gave me insight and focus to work on this specific thing. And it made a difference. And I saw it making a difference in the men's lives and the women's, because I work with both men and women. So it just, what do you call it, spontaneously morphed out of that experience in the 12-step program. I mean, in the jail, where I started, like I wrote, one day I just wrote accountability on the board. And it was like I let a rattlesnake loose in the group. Everybody was like, no, I'm already being accountable. I'm sitting in my accountability. And which they were, based on our societal definition of accountability. You look it up in the dictionary and it says blameworthy, someone punished, someone who's the one we're going to punish. So in what I had come to in my recovery, that accountability didn't mean that to me anymore. It meant my ability to account for behavior without blame or judgment. Just to say, because I needed a starting point. What am I going to do? Well, I'm going to be nice. Well, okay, but what's with the screaming and yelling? That was the pattern. I would find myself in the condescending, diminishing tone, inflection, some way diminishing my partner. And okay, so this was specific. Stop my violence. Accountability. Blame free, judgment free. Key point here. So it's simply stating the data. And when I found that I did that, something happened internal. And sometimes it was accompanied with a thought or an old event that led to where I found myself violent. Sometimes it was just a feeling of relief. Um, One of the things that helped me put this together, I don't know who I was talking to, or I was reading an article or something, but this guy got busted for um, fraud, and he was spending 5 years in jail. And I don't know if it was a news reporter or some journalist said, "How do you feel about that?" And he said, "Relieved." He didn't have to carry that with him, that deceit and lies and stealing from people. He felt relieved. How did he get? Oh, wait a minute. What? He's in jail and feels, oh, something happened that released him from something. So that added to, my focus on accountability. And the accountability tree came out, and if you make me co-host, I'm going to bring that up. I got it queued, but I'm going to talk about it first. The process of being accountable, blame-free, judgment-free, and then creating an intent specific to the statement I'm violent, the awareness. I'm out of denial. I can't blame this on somebody else. It's my choice. So I'm violent. That statement resonated, is that the right word? Resonated with something in my subconscious that thought being mean was a good idea. How could being violent was a good idea? How can violence be a good idea? Well, it kept people away from me. People see me coming, they'd like dodge and go someplace else. Or if they did get with me, they were real cautious about how they spoke because they knew you don't know what John's going to do. That kept me isolated from other people. And guess what? In my childhood, other people who said they loved me hurt me, and in a myriad of ways. And I don't remember most of it. And I'm not saying my parents were bad people. They were just who they were. And the result was I perceived how they treated me as abusive, violent. And I couldn't put that together as a child. I just felt shock and fight, flight, freeze, please. Most of mine was the freeze part. I just stop everything. I stopped breathing. I stopped because I didn't know what to do. So, and that stopping just shut me down so I could figure out what they needed me to do. So I would do that. Or I would become obstinate or I have a 8-year-old kid inside me. I call him a petulant 8-year-old. He just likes to make people mad. You tell him not to do it. He'll just walk over and do it and then look at you. And it's like, okay, do something about that, which was guiding my decisions as an adult. So, okay. And after I say the truth, I felt that, whatever that was. And that truth has encoded in it blame-free, judgment-free. If there's blame and judgment, then I get sidetracked on you did this to me and I did this and I wouldn't have done it. I feel the results of violence and something comes off me. And then I say, what do I want to change that to? And we use the word intent. I begin by asking people, what do you want that you don't have? So that they can create a focus or something to look at as they hear me speak that makes it pertinent to them. They're looking for peace of mind, or they're looking for confidence, or they're looking for freedom. Then what I say, they take it in based on what their focus is. So I give them the example. I said, I'm violent, my truth. Took a deep breath. And something happened emotionally. And then I say, oh, what do I want? Instead of, I intend to be kind. And we use that word, and I picked that word out specifically because we live in a universe that always says yes. So if I say I want to be kind, this universe will allow me to want to be kind for eternity. No problem. When I say I intend, that's proactive. That's focus. That's will. I intend to be kind. That my subconscious hears that, and like it said when I was a child, when somebody told me I'm a dumbass, yes. Oh, I intend to be kind with the frequency of the awareness I'm violent. That's like a raise in awareness, higher frequency. It goes into my subconscious at that higher truth, awareness, open, vulnerable place. I intend to be kind. Guess what it says? Yes. And then I find if you ask me when I first said that, okay, John, what are you going to do now? I don't know. I'm violent. It's like I have no idea what kindness is. I got a picture of it. You know, my picture of kind was weak. So if I tried to be kind, I would posture as weak or a doormat. I don't know. So it went into my subconscious in this frequency equal to, or, and I'm going to say greater than the trauma that caused the violence. And this mechanism had this charge, this, this directive to produce for me kindness or an experience of where I could choose kindness, or I would see something somebody else did. And before I thought, oh, that's pretty weak. That guy's a doormat. To see that as, oh my God, I missed it. It was right there. That's kind. But I saw it as weak. And I go, oh, shoot, I can do that. But if I hadn't put it in my subconscious intent, which is way different than I want, I intend to be kind. It, it's so powerful that based on the information given to me as a child, it produced a violent man. I didn't wake up and go, oh, when I get 35, I'm going to punch people in the face and I'm going to do this and I'm going to. No, I didn't. But that's what happened because that was the directive: keep people away. And that's the way my dad showed me. He had a big nose, and he also had it broken a couple times. So it was kind of like
Yeah.
that's the way a man does it. So okay, no. Here's what a self-actualized, accountable man does: is look to be kind. That's my idea of a man today. My idea of a man before I started was don't be weak. I don't care whatever it is. Don't look weak. Well, kindness, even generosity is kind. You could be like naive and like somebody's taking advantage of you. No, generosity is generosity. Kindness is kindness. And now that experience, kindness, generous, is now in my definition of man. This subconscious, I intend to be kind, helped me just like it helped me to be violent, which it worked, it kept people away, is now offering me everything I need to manifest kindness because that's what it was told. And it was told in a space of, when I say blame free, judgment free, what does that really mean? That's a space of unconditional, no blame, no judgment, love. So in this process, I'm accepting myself just the way I am. Now, violent, I'm not saying violence isn't destructive, that it impacts people around you in a destructive way, that it creates isolation and loneliness, that it creates fear in other people around you. I'm not saying that it doesn't do that. It does do that. I can finally recognize that that's what's happening. And actually, I want connection. So I intend to be generous. I intend to be kind. I start, oh my God, I feel loved. And these are things that happen as I'm going through my bumbling way I do things. But see, I have the insight now, or I have the opening: kindness, generosity, compassion. I intend to self-actualize. And I've got a really long list of intents that I've
Well,
made over the years.
uh, we started, we're running out of our time here, but we just start by talking about why are we doing this?
Yeah.
And I really like the way you brought us through. Initially, you got into this for relief,
Hmm.
and what happened over time as you stuck with it, as you discovered and you experimented with what we call the accountability practice, the accountability tree, opening up this information about what you want instead
Yeah.
and learning to actualize that. And I just want everybody who's watching this to know this is not just available to a couple of cute guys here on the Intentional Living podcast. This is something that every human being has access to.
Right.
And we do this, like I said at the top of the podcast, we do this in group setting, and we invite you to join us. All the meetings are on Zoom, and information as to time and day and the Zoom room address are all at the end of the podcast. So um, thank you, John, for that explication. And
You're welcome.
let's pick this up next week. I got some thoughts that I'd like to share and ask some questions about, so we'll do that next week. And so thank you very much, everybody, and
Yeah.
take care.
Thank you, Marty.